The machines in the high-tech medical room of the Chicago mansion beeped softly. 8-year-old Jamal Thorne lay still on the bed, his bright, curious eyes filled with a sadness no amount of money could fix. His legs, limp and useless since birth, were hidden under a light blue blanket. His father, Marcus Thorne, a man who could buy entire city blocks, stood by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking Lake Michigan, his shoulders shaking as silent tears streamed down his face. All his billions couldn't buy his son the one thing he wanted, the ability to run and play. Suddenly, a tiny voice cut through the heavy silence. "Mr. Thorne?" Marcus turned. Standing in the doorway was Maya, the 9-year-old daughter of his housekeeper, Sharon. She was a small girl with wide, serious eyes, and she was clutching something small and dirty in her hands as if it were a precious jewel. "I found this," she whispered, taking a hesitant step into the room. "I was digging in the old garden by your wife's forgotten rose bushes. I think this is why Jamal can't walk." What Maya held in her small hands was a corroded metal box. It didn't look like much, but the secrets hidden inside were about to unleash a storm of betrayal and heartbreak so devastating it would bring the entire Thorne empire to its knees and expose a monster hiding in plain sight. But before we uncover that shocking truth, let's go back to where the nightmare began. 8 years earlier, Marcus Thorne felt like the king of the world. He stood in the delivery room of the most exclusive private hospital in Chicago, his heart hammering against his ribs with a mix of pure joy and terrifying love. His wife, Aaliyah, lay on the bed, tired and pale, but her face glowed with a light Marcus had never seen before. The doctors had just placed their newborn son, Jamal, into her waiting arms. He was a perfect, tiny bundle, and Aaliyah was mesmerized. "He's beautiful, Marcus," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she counted his tiny fingers and toes. Marcus leaned down, kissing her forehead. Tears of happiness welled in his eyes. "We made him," he whispered back, his voice cracking. "He's perfect." They had prayed for this moment for years. After a long and difficult struggle to conceive, Aaliyah had finally become pregnant. Their life, already full of success and wealth, finally felt complete. Marcus reached out a single finger, and Jamal's tiny hand immediately wrapped around it, a small but powerful grip. In that moment, Marcus felt a love so fierce it almost hurt. Nothing could ever go wrong. But that perfect world shattered just a few hours later. When a nurse came to take Jamal for his routine newborn checkups, she noticed something wasn't right. The baby didn't kick his legs or wiggle his feet the way newborns do. They were limp, completely unresponsive. A frown creased the nurse's brow. She gently tickled his tiny feet. Nothing. She called the doctor immediately. What followed was a blur of frantic activity. Tests, scans, and a revolving door of specialists turned Marcus and Aaliyah's joy into a cold, creeping terror. Their family doctor, Dr. Lawrence, a man who had been a trusted friend for over a decade, led the investigation. He was a kind, silver-haired man who had attended their wedding and celebrated holidays with them. He seemed just as heartbroken and confused as they were. He ordered every test imaginable: brain scans, spinal taps, genetic screenings. Experts were flown in from all over the country to examine the tiny, silent baby. Every doctor searched for an answer, a reason, a single clue to explain what was happening. But they found nothing. Jamal's brain was perfectly healthy. His spine showed no signs of damage. His genetic tests came back clear of any known disorders. Medically, he was a perfectly healthy baby. Yet, from the waist down, he was completely paralyzed. "I don't understand," Marcus said weeks later, his voice raw with exhaustion and grief. He was sitting in Dr. Lawrence's plush office, the city lights twinkling far below. "How can my son be paralyzed for no reason? There has to be something you've missed. There has to be." Dr. Lawrence leaned forward, his face a mask of deep sympathy. "Marcus, I wish I had a better answer for you. I've consulted with the best minds in the country. Sometimes these things just happen. It could be a 1 in a billion fluke during his development in the womb. Something so microscopic that our modern science simply cannot detect it. I am so sorry." Marcus buried his face in his hands, a sob tearing from his chest. Aaliyah was still recovering in her hospital room. He had been putting off telling her the final, devastating news, hoping for a miracle that never came. How could he possibly tell the woman he loved that the son she had carried and dreamed of for 9 months would never be able to walk, run, or even stand? When he finally told her, her reaction was fierce denial. "No," she said, her voice shaking as tears streamed down her face. "The doctors are wrong. I don't care what their tests say. My son will walk. He has to." Panic crept into her voice. "We just need to find the right doctor, the right treatment. Money doesn't matter, Marcus. We can't give up." "We won't," he promised, pulling her into his arms as she sobbed. "I promise you, Aaliyah. We will do everything. We will never ever give up." And they kept that promise. In the months that followed, Marcus spent a fortune chasing a cure. They flew Jamal to the world's most advanced hospitals in Switzerland, Germany, and Japan. They met with top neurologists and experimental researchers. Each new doctor brought a flicker of hope, followed by the same crushing conclusion. Nathan's paralysis had no identifiable cause. It was a medical impossibility, a ghost in the machine of his tiny body. Aaliyah threw herself into research. She stayed up all night reading dense medical journals, her laptop glowing in the dark. She joined online forums, connecting with other parents of children with mysterious conditions. She explored every possible treatment, from radical physical therapies to holistic medicine and spiritual healers. Nothing made a difference. Jamal's legs remained as still and lifeless as the day he was born. The relentless stress began to destroy her. The vibrant, joyful woman Marcus had married began to fade away, replaced by a ghost haunted by grief and obsession. Dark circles formed under her eyes. She barely ate, her body growing thin and frail. "Aaliyah, please," Marcus would beg. "You have to take care of yourself. You're making yourself sick." "How can I rest when our son can't walk?" she would reply, her voice hollow and distant. "How can I sleep when I know there might be an answer out there, somewhere in the world, and we just haven't found it yet?" Throughout this dark time, Marcus's personal assistant, Vanessa, became his anchor. She had worked for him for 5 years and was ruthlessly efficient. While Marcus's world was falling apart, Vanessa kept his billion-dollar empire running like clockwork. She handled high-stakes negotiations, rescheduled board meetings around Jamal's appointments, and filtered every problem so that Marcus could focus on his family. "Don't worry about the Tokyo merger, Marcus," she'd say in her calm, capable voice. "I'll handle it. You just be with Aaliyah and Jamal. Family comes first." Marcus was deeply grateful. He saw her as the perfect employee, a loyal and dedicated professional. He was too consumed by his own pain to notice the small things. He didn't see the way Vanessa's eyes lingered on him when she thought he wasn't looking. He didn't notice how her touch would brush against his hand for a second too long when she passed him a document. He didn't realize that her concern for him felt less professional and more deeply personal. He was a drowning man and she was a lifeboat. He never thought to ask why she was so eager to save him. Then, when Jamal was just 10 months old, the unthinkable happened. One morning, as Aaliyah was dressing Jamal for yet another doctor's visit, she collapsed. Marcus heard the heavy thud from his home office and sprinted up the stairs. He found his wife unconscious on the nursery floor, with Jamal crying in his crib beside her. At the hospital, the doctors delivered another devastating blow. Aaliyah had suffered a massive stroke. For 3 days she lay in a coma, machines breathing for her. Marcus never left her side. He held her hand, whispering to her, begging her to come back to him. On the 4th day she briefly opened her eyes. Marcus leaned in close, his heart soaring with hope. "Aaliyah? I'm here." She struggled to speak, her words slurred and broken. "Marcus," she whispered, her eyes desperate. Something is not right? The pregnancy? It was wrong?" Her words became jumbled, a desperate puzzle he couldn't piece together. "Need to tell you?" "Shoo, don't talk," Marcus said, tears of relief and sorrow blurring his vision. "Save your strength. You're going to be okay. I'm right here." But she wasn't okay. That night, a second, more powerful stroke stole her from him forever. At 35 years old, Marcus Thorne, one of the richest men in Chicago, found himself a widower, with a paralyzed infant son and a fortune that now felt like a curse. The funeral was a grand, somber affair. Hundreds of Chicago's most powerful people came to offer their condolences. They all said the same things: that life was unfair, that she was too young, that they couldn't imagine his pain. Marcus stood through it all, a hollow man in a black suit, holding his silent son in his arms. Jamal would never know the fierce love of the mother who had fought so hard for him. In the dark months that followed Catherine's death, Dr. Lawrence became even more involved, visiting the mansion weekly to check on Jamal, his face always etched with concern. And Vanessa's role in Marcus's life grew. She was no longer just his assistant. She started staying late, helping with Jamal's feeding and bedtime routines. She organized his complex medical supplies and managed the schedules for his nurses and therapists. "You can't do this alone, Marcus," she told him one evening, her voice soft with sympathy as she tested the temperature of Jamal's bottle on her wrist. "Let me help you." Drowning in grief, Marcus accepted her help without a second thought. She brought order to his chaotic, broken world. She was always there, always calm, always knowing exactly what he needed. He was too shattered to see the careful, calculating pattern behind her kindness. He didn't notice how she slowly pushed the other household staff away from Jamal's care, creating a world where he and his son depended only on her. He was too lost in the fog of his sorrow to realize he was being caught in a beautifully woven spider's web. Years passed. The sharp edges of Marcus's grief softened into a constant, dull ache. The sprawling Chicago mansion, once filled with the echoes of Aaliyah's laughter, settled into a quiet, orderly routine. Jamal grew from a silent infant into a bright, curious boy. His legs remained motionless, but his mind was sharp and his spirit was strong. The mansion had been refitted with ramps and lifts. Jamal learned to navigate his world from a custom-built wheelchair, his small arms growing powerful from pushing himself down the long, polished hallways. He had his mother's warm smile and his father's determined eyes. Despite his limitations, he was a happy child who loved building complex Lego cities, reading books about space exploration, and asking endless questions about how the world worked. Marcus poured every ounce of his being into being the best father he could be. He read to Jamal every night, helped him with his grueling physical therapy exercises, and made sure his son knew he was loved fiercely and unconditionally. They were a team, a small island of two in a vast sea of wealth and quiet sorrow. The unanswered question of Jamal's paralysis was a ghost that haunted the house, a constant reminder of the life that had been stolen from them. Marcus never stopped searching for an answer, quietly funding research and consulting with new specialists, always holding onto a sliver of hope for a breakthrough that never came. Vanessa remained the unshakable pillar of their lives. She was no longer just an assistant, she was the unofficial manager of the Thorne household. She oversaw Jamal's team of nurses and tutors, managed Marcus's schedule with flawless precision, and guarded their privacy like a hawk. To the outside world, she was a saint, the devoted employee who had stepped up to help a broken family. Marcus saw her as a blessing, a friend he couldn't live without. He never realized that the bars of his gilded cage had been built by her, one kind gesture at a time. She had made herself so essential that the idea of functioning without her seemed impossible. When Jamal turned 7, Marcus decided the house was too quiet. Jamal needed more life, more warmth around him. Against Vanessa's subtle advice that new people could be disruptive, Marcus hired a new housekeeper. That's when Sharon and Maya Washington came into their lives. Sharon was a kind-hearted woman in her late 30s with a gentle voice and a warm, easy laugh. She had moved to Chicago from a smaller town down south, looking for a better life for her 9-year-old daughter, Maya. She needed a good job, and Marcus needed someone who could bring a little light back into his home. Sharon was different from the stiff, formal staff Vanessa usually hired. She hummed gospel hymns while she dusted and filled the kitchen with the smell of freshly baked cookies. More importantly, she treated Jamal not like a fragile patient, but like the bright little boy he was. Her daughter, Maya, was a whirlwind of energy. A skinny girl with 2 long braids and eyes that missed nothing, she was a firecracker of imagination and curiosity. While her mom worked, Maya spent her afternoons at the mansion, doing her homework in the big kitchen or exploring the sprawling grounds. At first, Maya was shy around Jamal. She had never known a kid in a wheelchair before. But children have a special kind of magic. They see the person, not the disability. Within a week, they were inseparable. Maya didn't see Jamal's chair as a boundary, she saw it as a spaceship, a race car, a pirate ship. She would push him at top speed through the gardens, both of them shrieking with laughter as they pretended to flee from space monsters. She would curl up at the foot of his bed and read from her favorite adventure books, doing all the voices and making Jamal laugh so hard his stomach hurt. For the first time in his life, Jamal had a real friend, someone who didn't pity him or treat him like he was made of glass. Vanessa did not like it one bit. "Marcus, I'm concerned," she said one evening, her voice laced with carefully practiced worry. "Children from her background, they can be careless. This house is filled with priceless artifacts. And Jamal is so vulnerable. Are you sure it's wise to let her have such free access to him?" Marcus waved her concerns away. "Vanessa, Maya's a good kid. She's the best thing that's happened to Jamal in years. He needs a friend. I won't lock him away from the world." Vanessa's smile tightened for just a second, a flicker of ice in her eyes before it vanished. "Of course, Marcus. You know best." But she began to watch Maya. Her gaze would follow the little girl around the house, cold and critical. She would find tiny faults, a smudge on the wall near where Maya was playing, a toy left out of place, and report them back to Sharon in a way that was both polite and threatening. Maya felt the chill of Vanessa's stare but didn't say anything. She didn't want to cause trouble for her mom. Time marched on. Jamal's 8th birthday arrived. Marcus, wanting to give his son a day of pure joy, threw a huge party. The mansion was filled with balloons, a magician performed incredible tricks, and kids from Jamal's adaptive sports league came to celebrate. For one perfect afternoon, Jamal was just another kid, surrounded by friends high on sugar and happiness. Maya stayed by his side the whole time, helping him open his presents and making sure he got the biggest piece of cake. But that night the joy faded. As Marcus was tucking him into bed, Jamal asked the question that shattered his father's heart all over again. "Dad," he said, his voice small and quiet, "why can't I walk like the other kids? Did I do something wrong?" Marcus felt the air leave his lungs. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled his son into a tight hug, fighting back a wave of tears. "Oh, Jamal. No. You didn't do anything wrong. Not a single thing," he whispered into his son's hair. "Sometimes our bodies just don't work the way we expect them to. But it doesn't change how amazing you are." "But I want to run," Jamal whispered back, his voice thick with tears. "I want to run and chase Maya in the garden. I want to kick a soccer ball." "I know, son. I know," Marcus said, his own tears finally falling. "And I promise you we are never ever going to stop looking for answers." That conversation reignited Marcus's desperate search. He spent weeks on the phone with new research labs and doctors, chasing down any new cutting-edge treatment, no matter how experimental or expensive. The old obsession came roaring back, a fire fueled by the pain in his son's voice. Maya saw the change in Mr. Thorne. She saw the worry return to his eyes. And she saw other things too. Little things that the adults missed. She saw the strange, intense way Vanessa looked at Mr. Thorne when he wasn't paying attention. One afternoon she overheard Vanessa on the phone, her voice low and angry. "After all these years," Vanessa had hissed into the receiver, "I've earned what I'm owed." Maya didn't understand it, but it sent a shiver down her spine. A few weeks after the party, on a warm autumn afternoon, Maya and Jamal were in the backyard. Jamal, tired from a long session of physical therapy, had fallen asleep in his wheelchair under the shade of a large oak tree. Maya, bored and full of energy, decided to go on an adventure. She wandered over to a forgotten part of the garden, a section that had once been Aaliyah's pride and joy. Her rose bushes were still there, but they were now overgrown with weeds and tangled vines. No one ever came back here. It was the perfect place for a secret expedition. Pushing through the tall grass, Maya pretended she was an explorer hacking her way through a dense jungle. In the far corner, almost completely hidden by an overgrown hedge, was an old stone bench covered in moss. As she got closer, she noticed something odd. The dirt in front of the bench looked different, looser, as if it had been dug up and put back. Her heart started to beat faster. Buried treasure. Curiosity taking over, she knelt and started clawing at the soft earth with her bare hands. Her fingers hit something hard and metallic. With growing excitement, she dug around the object, her hands covered in dirt, and pulled out a small, rusty metal box. She looked over at Jamal, wanting to share her discovery, but he was still fast asleep. This secret was hers for now. With trembling fingers, she worked at the corroded latch. It groaned, then popped open. Inside, wrapped in a brittle yellowed plastic bag, was a delicate gold locket and a small stack of folded papers. She opened the locket first. Inside were 2 tiny pictures. On one side was a beautiful woman with a radiant smile. On the other was a picture of a baby. Maya recognized Jamal instantly. This had to be his mother. Her excitement turned into a quiet reverence. This wasn't just treasure. This was important. The papers were harder to understand. They were letters written in a graceful, looping handwriting. Many of the words were too big for a 9-year-old, but she could piece together the meaning. They were from Jamal's mother, Aaliyah. They spoke of her pregnancy, of feeling sick and weak, of a strange fog in her mind that doctors kept dismissing. Then Maya's eyes landed on one sentence, written in a shaky, desperate scrawl that was different from the rest. Her blood ran cold. I think someone is poisoning me. I don't trust the medicine Vanessa brings me anymore. Dr. L says I'm just being an anxious mother, but I know something is wrong. I'm so afraid for my baby. I'm hiding this, in case the worst happens. Maya's hands trembled as she stared at the words. Poisoning me. The phrase echoed in the quiet garden, a terrifying secret unearthed from the dirt. For a moment, the 9-year-old girl was frozen, the weight of what she'd found pressing down on her. This was bigger than buried treasure. This was a buried truth. Her first thought was of Jamal. She scrambled back to the oak tree, the rusty box clutched to her chest. Jamal, she whispered, gently shaking his shoulder. Jamal, wake up. I found something. I found something important. Jamal blinked, his eyes fuzzy with sleep. What? What is it, Maya? It's your mom's, Maya said, her voice a breathless rush. I found a box with her things. There are letters. She wrote that someone was poisoning her when she was pregnant with you. The sleep vanished from Jamal's eyes, replaced by a sharp, sudden alertness that made him look older than his 8 years. Poisoning? What are you talking about? Let me see. Maya carefully opened the box again. She showed him the locket first, his mother's beautiful, smiling face looking back at them. Jamal reached out a shaky hand and touched the cool metal. He had only ever seen his mother in pictures, a smiling ghost in the mansion's grand portraits. This was different. This was real. Then Maya unfolded one of the fragile letters, holding it so he could see the elegant, looping script. His eyes scanned the page, his lips moving silently as he tried to make out the words. His face grew pale. Maya, he said, his voice barely a whisper but filled with an urgent fire. We have to find my dad. Right now. This could be it. This could be the reason. He didn't have to finish the sentence. They both knew what he meant. The reason I can't walk. Maya nodded, her own fear replaced by a fierce determination. Let's go. She grabbed the handles of his wheelchair, and with a strength born of adrenaline, she pushed him as fast as she could across the wide, manicured lawn. The metal box sat in Jamal's lap, a ticking time bomb of truth that had been silent for 8 long years. They burst through the patio doors into the kitchen, startling Maya's mother, Sharon, who was chopping vegetables for dinner. Mama, where's Mr. Thorne? Maya yelled, not even stopping to catch her breath. Sharon looked up, her brow furrowed with concern at the sight of the 2 panicked children. He's in his study with Miss Vanessa, going over some business reports. Maya, what on earth is wrong? You 2 look like you've seen a ghost. We need to see him now, Mama, Jamal said, his voice surprisingly firm. It's about my mother. The name Aaliyah hung in the air, a name rarely spoken in this house. The look on Sharon's face changed instantly from concern to alarm. She wiped her hands on her apron without a word and led them down the long, silent hallway towards Marcus's private study. The heavy oak door was slightly ajar. They could hear Vanessa's voice inside, low and smooth, sounding less like an employee and more like an intimate confidant. Sharon knocked firmly. Mr. Thorne, she called out. I'm sorry to interrupt, but Jamal and Maya need to speak with you. They said it's urgent. It's about Mrs. Thorne. The voice inside stopped abruptly. A heavy silence fell, and then Marcus's voice, tight with confusion, called, Come in. Sharon pushed the door open. The scene inside was one of perfect domestic trust. Marcus sat behind his massive mahogany desk, and Vanessa stood beside him, leaning over his shoulder to point at a document, her perfume hanging faintly in the air. She was standing closer than a normal assistant would, a casual intimacy in her posture. A flash of pure irritation crossed her face at the interruption before she quickly smoothed it into a neutral smile. But Marcus wasn't looking at her. His eyes were locked on his son. He saw Jamal's pale face, his trembling hands, and the rusty box he was clutching. Jamal? What's wrong? What is that? Marcus asked, standing and walking around the desk. Dad, Jamal said, his voice shaking. Maya found something. It was buried in Mom's old garden. You need to read these. Maya stepped forward and took the box from Jamal's lap, holding it up to Marcus. I'm sorry for digging, Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice small but clear. I was just playing. I found this under the old stone bench. It has letters from Mrs. Aaliyah. And she wrote something really scary. Marcus took the box with a sense of dread. His hands began to shake as he lifted the lid. He saw the locket first and a choked sound escaped his throat. He had given it to Aaliyah for their anniversary. He thought it had been lost forever during her illness. With trembling fingers, he opened it and stared at the photo of his beautiful wife holding their infant son, a perfect moment from a lifetime ago. Vanessa moved closer, her expression a careful mix of concern and control. Marcus, this is probably just some old sentimental trinket. You shouldn't upset yourself. Vanessa, please, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. His eyes were now fixed on the folded letters. Just give me a moment. He unfolded the first letter. The paper was old and stained, but Aaliyah's handwriting was unmistakable. As he read, the color drained from his face. His hands shook so violently that the paper rattled. The letter described her 7th month of pregnancy. She wrote of a constant, sick feeling that went beyond morning sickness. She wrote of muscle weakness, of a strange numbness in her hands and feet, of a mental fog she couldn't shake. She had told Dr. Lawrence about it all, but he had waved it off as pregnancy nerves. Then came the part that made Marcus's blood run cold. Aaliyah wrote about Vanessa. She wrote about the special vitamin supplements Vanessa insisted she take, supposedly prescribed by Dr. Lawrence. She wrote about the calming herbal teas Vanessa prepared for her every evening, and how she always felt worse after drinking them. The more Aaliyah questioned things, the more Dr. Lawrence and Vanessa had treated her like a hysterical, hormonal woman. The final paragraph was a punch to the gut. I confronted V today about the supplements. She became so defensive, almost angry, insisting she was only trying to help. But I saw something in her eyes, fear. I've decided to stop taking anything she gives me. I'm going to secretly save samples. If I'm right, if someone is doing this to me and my baby on purpose, I need proof. I'm hiding this letter in the locket. If anything happens to me, someone has to know the truth. The letter ended there, as if she had been interrupted. Marcus looked up from the page, his face a ghostly white. His gaze, now filled with a dawning, terrible horror, met Vanessa's. She had gone completely still, her face a perfect mask of composure, but her eyes held the panicked look of a cornered animal. Vanessa, Marcus said, his voice a dead, hollow whisper. What is my wife talking about in this letter? Vanessa let out a small, practiced laugh, a sound that was horribly out of place. Marcus, she was clearly not well. You remember how difficult the pregnancy was. The hormones, the stress. She was having paranoid delusions. Poor Aaliyah was looking for something to blame for how bad she felt. Then explain this, Marcus demanded, his voice gaining a raw, ragged edge as he stood up, the letter trembling in his fist. Explain why she felt she had to bury this. Explain why my wife was so afraid she had to hide evidence in the garden. I can't explain the actions of a woman who was losing her grip on reality, Vanessa said smoothly, but a tiny tremor had entered her voice. Marcus, you're upset. This has been a shock. Let's talk about this calmly after you've had some time. Get out, Marcus whispered. What? Get out, he roared, the sound exploding from him, a raw mix of 8 years of pain and a fresh, unspeakable rage. Get out of my house. The mask of composure on Vanessa's face finally cracked, shattering into a million pieces. You can't be serious, she shrieked. You're going to believe the mad scribbles of a dead woman over me? I have stood by you for years. I helped you raise your son. I ran your company when you were too lost in grief to function. I've been here for you through everything. And you've been under investigation as of this moment, Marcus interrupted, his voice now like ice. He already had his phone in his hand, his thumb hovering over his security chief's number. The police will be contacted immediately. And if these letters are true, if you and Lawrence had anything to do with what happened to my wife and my son, I swear to you, I will spend every last dollar I have to make sure you rot in a prison cell for the rest of your life. Vanessa stared at him, her face twisting with a storm of emotions. Disbelief, fear, and then something dark and ugly. Pure venomous hatred. You have no proof, she hissed. Just the fantasies of a sick, dying woman. Then you have nothing to worry about, Marcus said coldly. Sharon, please call security. Have Miss Crawford escorted from the property. She is to take nothing but her purse. As Sharon hurried out of the room to make the call, Vanessa looked at Marcus one last time, and the mask didn't just crack, it fell away completely, revealing the monster that had been hiding underneath for nearly a decade. You never even saw me, she spat, her voice breaking with a bitter, obsessive rage. All those years I loved you. I did everything for you and you never saw me as anything more than your assistant. Was always her. Perfect, beautiful Aaliyah. Even after she died you couldn't let her go. I gave you the best years of my life, Marcus. I deserved to be in her place. Are you confessing? Marcus asked, his voice chillingly calm as he discreetly hit the record button on his phone. Vanessa's eyes widened as she realized her mistake. She snapped her mouth shut, but it was too late. The ugly truth was out, hanging in the air of the silent study. Within minutes, 2 stone-faced security guards arrived. They flanked Vanessa, who stood frozen, her face pale with the sudden, terrible understanding of how completely she had destroyed herself. As they led her away, she didn't say another word. She didn't look at Marcus or the 2 small children who had brought her world crashing down. She just stared straight ahead, a statue of silent, burning hate. After the security guard's footsteps faded down the hall, a heavy, crushing silence filled the study. The storm of rage had passed, leaving behind the wreckage. Marcus collapsed into his leather chair, the recorded confession on his phone feeling as heavy as a block of lead. He stared at the letters clutched in his hand, his wife's elegant handwriting a testament to a truth he had been blind to for 8 agonizing years. The woman who had organized his life, who had comforted his son, who had acted as his most trusted friend, was a monster. She had not only stood by and watched his family crumble, she had been the one holding the hammer. Jamal wheeled himself quietly across the thick rug until he was beside his father's desk. He didn't speak, just rested a small hand on his father's arm. The touch seemed to break a dam inside Marcus. A deep, shuddering sob tore through him, the sound of a heart breaking all over again. "Dad," Jamal said softly, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. Does this mean someone made me this way on purpose?" Marcus looked at his son. His brave, beautiful boy who had never known a day without struggle, who had faced every limitation with a strength that humbled him. The tears streamed down Marcus's face as he nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "I think so, son," he finally managed to say, his voice thick with a grief so profound it felt like poison. "I think they hurt your mother and they hurt you before you were even born." Jamal was quiet for a long moment, his young mind processing a horror that no child should ever have to confront. Then he said something that pierced through Marcus's despair with a ray of pure light. "At least now we know," Jamal said. "At least it's not a mystery anymore." The not knowing was the worst part. Marcus pulled his son from his wheelchair into a fierce embrace, burying his face in Jamal's shoulder. His son's wisdom was an anchor in the storm. They weren't just victims of a random tragedy. They were survivors of a deliberate, evil act. And that meant they could fight back. That night, the Thorne mansion, usually a place of quiet order, became a command center. Marcus didn't sleep. He was a man possessed, fueled by a cold, precise fury. He called his team of lawyers, who in turn contacted the Chicago Police Department's top detectives. He hired a team of private investigators to start digging into every corner of Vanessa's and Dr. Lawrence's lives. The letters, the locket, and the audio recording of Vanessa's confession were carefully handed over as evidence. The investigation moved with lightning speed. Within 24 hours, detectives had warrants to search Vanessa's luxury downtown apartment and Dr. Lawrence's prestigious medical office. What they uncovered was more damning than Marcus could have ever imagined. Hidden in a false bottom of Vanessa's closet was a collection of personal journals, meticulously kept for over a decade. In page after page of neat, controlled handwriting, she had documented her deepening obsession with Marcus. She wrote of her burning jealousy of Aaliyah, her belief that she was the one who truly deserved to be Mrs. Thorne. The pregnancy had been the final straw. Her journal entries turned dark, detailing her research into obscure toxins, chemicals that could disrupt fetal development without being easily traced. That's where Dr. Lawrence came in. Vanessa's journal revealed his secret. He was a fraud. 4 years he had been overbilling his wealthy patients, prescribing unnecessary medications for kickbacks, and falsifying insurance claims. Vanessa, in her efficient way, had stumbled upon the evidence and saw her opportunity. She didn't want money. She wanted a partner in crime. The journals laid out the entire horrific plot. She had blackmailed Dr. Lawrence into helping her. He would prescribe special vitamins for Aaliyah's high-risk pregnancy. But mixed into those pills were carefully measured doses of a chemical compound known to cause severe neurological damage, specifically targeting the developing spinal cord. The plan was not to kill Aaliyah, but to ensure her child was born with a severe disability. Vanessa had fantasized that the strain of a special needs child would destroy the marriage, that Marcus would turn to her for support, and she would finally take her rightful place. Aaliyah's stroke and death had been an unforeseen complication. The combination of the poison and the stress of pregnancy had been too much for her body to handle. Vanessa's journals expressed a flicker of shock, not out of remorse, but because it ruined her twisted fantasy of slowly replacing Aaliyah. The evidence from Dr. Lawrence's office was just as sickening. Investigators found his private patient notes, where he had clinically documented the effects of the toxins on Aaliyah. He had noted Jamal's paralysis at birth with a chilling detachment, writing that the protocol was successful. He confessed everything the moment he was confronted, sobbing and trying to paint himself as a victim of Vanessa's blackmail. But financial records showed that Vanessa had been paying him handsomely for his cooperation, using money she had been systematically embezzling from Marcus's company for years. The story exploded across the news. "The Billionaire's betrayal," the headlines screamed. News vans camped outside the gates of the Thorne mansion, reporters clamoring for a statement. Marcus shielded Jamal from all of it, turning the mansion into a fortress. His only focus now was on the second part of his promise to his son. They now had the truth. Now they had to find a cure. Armed with a list of specific toxins that had poisoned his son, Marcus launched a new global search. He sent the information to the world's leading neurologists and regenerative medicine specialists. For the first time, doctors weren't looking at a mystery, they were looking at a specific chemical injury. A week later, a call came from a Dr. Anya Sharma, a pioneering researcher at a facility in Boston. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice calm and professional, "what was done to your son is a tragedy. But knowing the cause gives us a roadmap. We have an experimental treatment here, a combination of targeted stem cell therapy and neuroelectrical stimulation. I can't promise a miracle. The damage was done 8 years ago. But for the first time in your son's life, there is a scientifically based reason to hope." Hope. It was a word Marcus hadn't allowed himself to truly feel in years. Before they left for Boston, Marcus sat down with Sharon and Maya in the mansion's sunroom. "I don't have the words to thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Maya, you did something that an army of doctors and investigators couldn't do. You found the truth." He had his lawyers present Sharon with documents for 2 trust funds he had established. One would pay for Maya's complete education, through any university in the world she chose. The other would ensure that Sharon would be financially secure for the rest of her life. Sharon started to protest, tears in her eyes. "Mr. Thorne, we didn't do it for money." "I know," Marcus said gently. "That's why you deserve it. You and Maya are family now. I want you to come with us to Boston. Jamal is going to need his best friend with him." The flight to Boston felt different from all the other medical trips they had taken over the years. Those had been journeys of desperation. This was a journey of possibility. The treatment facility was bright and filled with art, designed for children. Dr. Sharma met them personally. She was a brilliant, no-nonsense woman with kind eyes. After a full day of evaluations, she sat down with Marcus. "The damage is severe," she said, pointing to scans of Jamal's spine on a large screen. "The neural pathways from his brain to his lower body are almost non-existent. Normally, I would say the prognosis is 0. Marcus's heart sank. "However," Dr. Sharma continued, "your son's case is unique. Look here." She pointed to tiny, faint sparks of light on the scan. "These are dormant neural connections. They're incredibly weak, but they are there. It's as if his body has been trying to build a bridge for 8 years with no materials. Our treatment is designed to give his body those materials." She looked him directly in the eye. "The process will be painful. We will be waking up nerves that have been asleep his entire life. It will be a long, grueling road with no guarantees. But there is a chance. A real one. When Marcus explained it to Jamal, with Maya sitting by his side holding his hand, the 8-year-old boy looked at the doctor with a solemn determination that made him seem ancient. "I want to try," Jamal said. "Even if it hurts. I want to try." The first treatment began the next morning. Jamal was brave as the doctors administered the stem cell injections into his lower back. Maya was right there, telling him a ridiculous story about a squirrel who wanted to be an astronaut to keep his mind off the needles. Then they moved to the second phase. Small electrodes were placed all over Jamal's lifeless legs. "This machine will send tiny electrical pulses to try and stimulate those dormant nerves," Dr. Sharma explained gently. "It might feel strange, Jamal. Just tell us what you feel." Jamal nodded, his knuckles white as he gripped the side of the bed. Marcus stood by, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. The technician flipped a switch. The machine hummed to life. For a second nothing happened. Jamal's face was a mask of concentration. Then his eyes flew wide open. A sharp gasp escaped his lips. It wasn't a sound of pain but of pure, unadulterated shock. Tears began to stream down his face, but he was smiling. He looked at his father, his eyes shining with a universe of impossible feelings. "Dad," he whispered, his voice trembling with awe. "I can feel something. In my legs. Dad. I can feel them." For 8 years, Jamal's legs had been a silent, empty space. Now they were on fire. It wasn't pain, not exactly. It was a bizarre, overwhelming storm of sensation. A pins and needles tingling combined with a deep, buzzing hum, as if a long-dead power line had suddenly been flooded with electricity. It was the feeling of nothingness being violently replaced by something. Tears streamed down Jamal's face, a mixture of shock, confusion, and a joy so intense it felt like it could tear his small body apart. "I can feel them," he repeated, the words a prayer of disbelief. "It feels weird." Marcus dropped to his knees beside the bed, his own tears flowing freely as he took his son's hand. He looked at Dr. Sharma, his eyes begging for an explanation. She was smiling, a look of profound satisfaction on her face. "That's excellent, Jamal," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the emotional haze. "That is the sound of your nerves waking up. For the first time, your brain is receiving signals from your legs. This is exactly what we hoped for. This is the beginning." That first day was a miracle. But miracles are not easy. The beginning of healing was also the beginning of a new kind of battle. The treatments were relentless. Every morning began with the injections, followed by hours of electrical stimulation that left Jamal's body trembling with exhaustion. The strangeness of the new sensations slowly morphed into real pain as the nerves grew stronger and sent clearer, sharper signals. After the stimulation came the physical therapy. It was grueling work. 2 therapists would work with him for hours, moving his limp legs through ranges of motion, stretching muscles that had never been used. Jamal's job was to concentrate, to try and connect his mind to his limbs, to think about moving them even when they wouldn't respond. Some days were filled with frustration. He would stare at his foot, screaming at it in his mind to move, to just twitch, but it would remain stubbornly still. On those days he would cry from sheer exhaustion and a feeling of hopelessness. "I can't do it," he sobbed one afternoon, his face buried in his pillow after a particularly difficult session. "It hurts and nothing is happening." Maya, who had been sitting quietly in the corner doing her homework, came over and sat on the edge of his bed. She didn't say, "You can do it," or offer empty encouragement. Instead, she just looked at him with her serious, wise eyes. "Do you remember last week?" she asked. "When you told me you couldn't feel anything below your knees?" Jamal nodded, not looking up. "Can you feel your feet now?" she asked. He paused. "Yeah," he admitted in a small voice. "They won't stop tingling." "Okay then," Maya said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "So something is happening." She then opened her history book. "Now, do you want to hear about how George Washington Carver invented a bunch of stuff from peanuts? It's way more interesting than feeling sorry for yourself." Her simple logic, her refusal to let him wallow in his pain, was the medicine he needed. She was his rock, his cheerleader, and his best friend, reminding him of how far he'd come when all he could see was how far he still had to go. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, the trial of Vanessa Crawford and Dr. Lawrence had begun. Marcus received daily updates on his phone, reading them late at night after Jamal was asleep. The prosecution laid out the case with devastating precision, using Vanessa's own journals and Dr. Lawrence's terrified confession as their primary weapons. The courtroom was captivated by the story of calculated, cold-blooded betrayal. Vanessa's defense lawyer tried to argue that she was a fantasist, a lonely woman writing a dark work of fiction. But when the prosecutors played the audio of her confession from Marcus's phone, a collective gasp went through the courtroom. Her bitter, hate-filled words, "I deserve to be in her place," sealed her fate. Dr. Lawrence's defense was to blame Vanessa for everything, painting himself as a terrified man trapped by blackmail. But the prosecution presented the bank records, showing the steady flow of embezzled money into his accounts, proving he was a paid and willing participant in the evil scheme. 2 weeks into the treatment, the miracle they were fighting for showed its first real sign. During a therapy session, as a therapist moved his right leg, Jamal suddenly shouted, "Wait! Stop!" Everyone in the room froze. I think I did that," he whispered, staring at his foot. The therapist carefully positioned his leg. "Okay, Jamal. I want you to look at your big toe. Don't try too hard. Just think about wiggling it." The room was silent. Marcus held his breath. Maya stood on her tiptoes, her eyes glued to Jamal's foot. Jamal stared, his face scrunched in concentration. For 5 long seconds nothing happened. And then it twitched. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement, but it was real. It was voluntary. Maya let out a piercing scream of pure joy, jumping up and down. Marcus rushed forward, falling to his knees and grabbing his son's hand, his laughter mixing with tears. "I did it," Jamal whispered, a look of pure astonishment on his face. "I moved it. I really moved it." That tiny twitch was a seismic shift. It was proof. The bridge Dr. Sharma had talked about was being built. A signal had crossed from his brain to his toe. It was possible. Marcus immediately called his lawyers and told them the news. The next day in court, the prosecutor called Dr. Sharma as a surprise rebuttal witness. She testified via video link from Boston, explaining the experimental treatment and the breakthrough that had occurred. Jamal Thorne, she stated, her voice clear and strong, a boy who was told he would never have any function in his legs, voluntarily moved his toe yesterday. This proves that the damage done to him was not just a permanent state, but a theft of his future potential. A potential he is now having to fight, through immense pain and effort, to reclaim. As Dr. Sharma spoke, a news camera in the courtroom zoomed in on Vanessa. For the first time, her cold, emotionless mask shattered completely. As she heard that Jamal was actually getting better, her face twisted into a brief, ugly snarl of pure rage. It lasted only a second, but everyone saw it. The jury saw it. She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was angry that her evil work was being undone. After 3 weeks of deliberations, the jury returned. The verdict was read aloud, a drumbeat of justice. Guilty. Vanessa Crawford, guilty on all counts. Conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, grievous bodily harm. Guilty. Dr. Lawrence, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced Vanessa to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Dr. Lawrence received 25 years. When Marcus told Jamal the news, the boy was quiet for a long time. "So they're never going to hurt anyone else again?" he asked. "No, son," Marcus said. "They're not." "Good," Jamal said simply. "I'm glad." The next 3 months were a blur of small, hard-won victories. The toe twitch became a foot flex. The foot flex became an ankle rotation. Sensation slowly, painstakingly returned to his legs. The day he was lifted into a special harness to bear weight on his own legs for the first time, he lasted only 10 seconds before his muscles gave out. But for those 10 seconds he was standing. The culmination of all their work came 4 months after they had arrived in Boston. The goal for the day was simple: 1 step. Supported by the harness and with therapists on either side, Jamal stood, his legs trembling violently with the effort. "You can do it, Jamal," Maya whispered from the sidelines. "I know," he grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. He focused all his energy, all his will, on his right leg. He lifted it. It was clumsy and shaky, but it moved forward. He placed his foot on the ground. Then he did the same with his left. He had taken 2 steps. He then managed 2 more before his strength gave out completely. The room erupted in applause. Richard scooped his son into a hug, lifting him from the harness, not caring about the therapist's protocols. He held his son, who was crying and laughing at the same time. He had walked. A month later they returned to Chicago. Life was different now. Jamal still used his wheelchair most of the time, but every day was filled with hours of therapy. He now had a set of high-tech leg braces and a walker, and with them he could slowly, carefully walk across a room. Every step was a testament to his unbreakable spirit. On a crisp, sunny afternoon, Marcus drove Jamal and Maya to the cemetery. They went to Aaliyah's grave, a simple, elegant stone under a large oak tree. Marcus watched as Jamal, gripping his walker with white knuckles, painstakingly got out of his chair. With Maya standing close by, ready to help, he took slow, deliberate steps across the grass. He made it all the way to the headstone on his own. He reached out a trembling hand and rested it on the cool marble, right below his mother's name. "Hi, Mom," he said, his voice clear and strong in the quiet air. "I'm sorry it took so long. We found your letters. We know the truth now." He looked back at his dad, his eyes shining. "And Mom," he said, pushing down on his walker and standing as tall as he could. "I wanted you to see. I can stand." Marcus watched his son standing by his wife's grave with his best friend at his side. The 8 years of pain, of mystery, of grief had not vanished, but they no longer had the power to destroy them. The truth, unearthed by a little girl with a curious heart, had not given them back what they had lost, but it had given them something just as precious: a future, a chance to heal. A new beginning built on the strongest foundation of all: a father's love, a son's courage, and the simple, powerful truth that even after the darkest night, the sun will always rise.